Kia ora, good evening. A plan to revamp Invercargill's inner city has been approved by the Inner City Redevelopment Committee and work could begin later this year. The Invercargill Inner City Revitalisation Plan was last night approved by the Inner City Working Committee. Among plans, family and youth-friendly open spaces in Esk Street and Wachna Place, pocket parks, pedestrian shelters on Tay, D, Esk and Don Streets, and a market site that incorporates car parking and staging. Committee Chair, Councillor Norman Elder, says the plan will be presented to Council on August 27th with the recommendation that Council adopt and implement it. It's expected work could begin this summer with the project to be staged.
There are about 11 or 12 precincts, what we call precincts, and what happens is that there are no particular order, but they're numbered 1 to 11 on the basis that's the most logical way to start the process. So the first thing that will happen, you'll see the streets in Tay and D narrowed down, and there'll be better crossings and more coverage and connectivity throughout the rest of the city.
So what's the cost and who's going to be paying for this?
We've done an estimate of the costs around about the $6.6 million mark, but they're only estimates, and now we have to go to the design phase and then go out and cost that in the open market. So we're not just quite sure. I think it'll be more than $6 million for sure. Who pays? Well, there are a variety of budgets that comes out of it. As I say, we've allowed $6 million, but there's NZTA's contribution and the number of other roading budgets and street budgets. So it's going to be a combination of budgets that fund that. Will
some of it come down to ratepayers?
Yes, the ratepayers have been ring-fenced in the inner city, so they're going to be paying primarily the large part of that. And that's been signalled in our long-term plans.
So in terms of benefits for businesses in the inner city, what kind of benefits could they see from this?
Yeah, well, this is the first time we've really had a plan in the city so that investors and retailers and businessmen can see what the council is doing, and based on that information then they can decide where they're going to invest. But we think the city centre is going to contract naturally, and we can't stop that, and I think that's not a bad thing because then it creates a better heart. So when the plans are available for inspection now, and they'll be able to decide for themselves what and where and how they want to invest. But we think it's going to be a stimulus for landowners and building owners to actually do up their buildings and make them safer and look better.
Now, what could be some of the first changes that we're going to see?
The first changes I think you will see, apart from Tay and D, the road narrowing, will be here in S Street, and the bowling green, the old bowling green, and that's going to be created into an adventure park and have lots of exciting things. And the car park just up here will be converted into sort of a place where you can have markets and concerts and that type of thing.
Southlanders were among thousands of people around the country demonstrating against the recent decision by government to allow testing of legal highs on animals. Around 150 people, accompanied by about a dozen dogs, marched from Victoria Avenue to Wachna Place, protesting against animal testing. National organisers say the protests are a grassroots march of everyday New Zealanders stemming from a Facebook page. The marches were held today as it's the first day Parliament sits since this became law. Animal lover and local protest promoter Debs Townshend says she hopes the event raised awareness.
The message today is that legal highs shouldn't be tested on animals, and getting the word out there, because there's a lot of people that don't realise that it actually is happening in New Zealand. It's not just mice and rats, it's dogs, cats, and a lot of other animals, so it just needs to stop.
What are you hoping will come out of this protest?
Awareness. There's a lot of people that are here that actually didn't have any idea of what was going on, so more than anything, yeah, it's just getting the word out there.
Water quality in New Zealand rivers appears to be improving, according to data released by the Ministry for the Environment. The report shows overall concentrations of nutrients and bacteria are either stable or improving at most monitored sites, and that water quality is generally improving. The indicator is based on data collected from more than 300 sites over 10 years. While the Swimming Suitability Indicator, which provides a summary of monitored swimming sites, shows mixed results in Southland, with sites ranging from very poor to very good. Environment Minister Amy Adams says the reports paint an encouraging picture but also underline the need for reforms. Cultural ties were recognised this morning with a reception at the Invercargill City Council. A mayoral function was held at Council Chambers for around 20 students from Kumagai's Prefectory Girls High School, visiting the city on an exchange program, part of a long-standing sister-city relationship. The function was a chance for the Japanese high school students and their chaperones to meet Invercargill Mayor Tim Shadbolt and other council staff. Invercargill and Kumagai have had a sister-city relationship for 20 years. The students have been studying at Southland Girls High School. Stay with us after the break. Building consents hit the highest level in several years. Welcome back. The number of building consents issued for new houses hit a 5-year high in the June 2013 quarter, according to figures released by Statistics New Zealand today. More than 5,200 consents for new builds were issued between April and June, the most since the June 2008 quarter. Industry and Labour Statistics Manager Blair Cardno says the seasonally adjusted number of new houses rose 16%, and the trend has been rising for the past 2 years, with the level now similar to that of 5 years ago. The total value of all building work consented in the June quarter was almost $3 billion. Invercargill Mayor Tim Shadbolt says he believes councils will likely have no choice about amalgamation in the future. He's recently returned from the New Zealand Local Government Conference and says some councils are electing to look at joining together, but believes it's likely that choice will eventually be removed.
There are several issues. The far north is first in the queue, but of course as soon as you have an issue that affects the regional council, all the local councils are dragged into that process. Once they finish with that, there's Hawke's Bay, which is 5 councils that are looking at uniting, and then after that Wellington, where there's 5 different proposals for 5 councils. So I think it's going to be quite a difficult process, probably looking at least 2 years of work by the Local Government Commission to work out just those 3 proposals.
Do you think that councils will be given the choice on whether they do want to restructure and come together, or do you think it's inevitable that they'll be told to do it?
Well, at the moment we're in an era of free choice, and government is stepping back a bit from the picture and saying, look, try and work it out between yourselves. However, I think after the next general election, if this government wins, they're likely to adopt the Michael Bassett solution of 1989, which is just to tell all the councils, this is what we want, you've got a year to work it out. And there's no evidence of that, but I have a feeling that it'll be so messy just trying to sort out the first 3 that they'll be looking for an alternative solution right across the country.
Is this something that you've discussed with regional and district councils here, is the possibility of amalgamation?
Well, I think it's always underlying everything we do, especially in terms of shared services. And I think what we were hoping was that if we develop shared services enough, it would undermine the need for having a single council for Southland. And that may be the case if we can get all our computers aligned and all our systems and building permits aligned. It would be a strong case for not having to amalgamate. However, it could be an equally strong argument for how well it works when we do join forces. So it's difficult to know whether we'll be out of the frying pan and into the fire or not.
More than 600,000 New Zealanders live with a disability, including around 1 in 5 in Southland. Statistics New Zealand is undertaking a survey of people with disabilities, which will allow their voices to be heard. Sarah Bedford spoke to DRC Southland General Manager Debbie Webster about how the survey could help people.
Well, I think it has a really big impact on policy. It helps create policy, and I think it seems that the government's movement at the moment is towards giving disabled people or consumers of disability services the choice and the control and the flexibility to live their lives the way they want. So this is vitally important.
How much of a better of an idea as to how people may need representation or help do you think this kind of survey could give?
I think it gives voice. Often disabled people And depending on disability, disability is such a broad, range, but particularly people that perhaps aren't verbal, that can't represent themselves particularly well, it does give them a collective voice. And it's extremely hard to hear that voice, particularly from the people that, high and complex needs people. But at the end of the day, it's about living an ordinary life, and that's what people want to do, whether you've got a disability or not.
So why is it important, in your view, for people with a disability to be heard in this way?
Because every person's entitled to be heard. I think we've got to be really careful we don't marginalise people even saying I'm a disabled person. I'm a person who happens to sit in a wheelchair or doesn't hear or doesn't see. It's about, every New Zealander is entitled to have their needs heard, and what the things that help them to live a good life is what it's about.
Do you think it's been a long time coming, getting this kind of work happening?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. I think probably the disability sector has been an unheard or marginalised part of New Zealand society for a long time. I also think too, people, they often lump health and disability together, but often health really has no concept of what being a disabled person is about. It's the thing of going into hospital, and if you're blind and having your food tray put at the end of your bed and not being told that your meal's there. Often people, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of, I think disability awareness is something that New Zealanders need to understand more and be more appreciative of. Everybody has the right to hear, understand and be heard.
Students at the Southland Institute of Technology are settling into the second half of the school year, but the first few days back are about more than just being in the classroom. Cake eating, strength testing and pitting students against teachers are some of the activities at SIT's Invercargill campus this week as students take part in Reorientation Week. Reorientation Week is organised by the Institute's Student Services Department to help integrate students and show them the services there. Around 300 students were expected at Reorientation Week activities today, which also included pool and table tennis competitions. And that's it from news. Coming up in sport, Southland Formula Ford driver Brendan Leach. From the news team, good night.